welcome to this session, which I think is going to be the ins and outs of a duck's bum of community, or something like that. My name's Phil. Just wanted to start with, again, to set the day and the tone, to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung mob and their connection and past connection and what this country means to them and their ongoing connections. We're going to introduce ourselves and where we're from, but we thought just quickly we would go around the room, even though it's big, but to make it clear, just your name and the community you're from, or if you're not in a community, just go community interested or something succinct like that. Or community uninterested, don't like it, that's fine, you're free to leave now. You're at the wrong venue. So we'll do that, then we'll fully introduce ourselves and get into it.
Bernadette, community interested.
Jack, community interested.
Benjamin, woofing at Mora Mora.
Anna, community interested.
Nicola, open field co-living in Castlemaine.
Jason, Co-housing Australia, and Jen.
Melissa, definitely community interested.
Mora Mora, I'm getting bored.
Carol Dharmananda.
Trudy, Cicada Co-op, and Jen.
Elise Mora Community Co-op.
Tanya, interested in communities.
Andrew Mullaney, Eco Village.
KJ and MC, community oriented.
And Chris.
Where are we going now?
Tanya, Narara Eco Village and Global Eco Village Network.
Hi, Risha, community interested.
Dave, Narara.
Lyndall, Narara.
Bridie, Narara.
There's the enclave. Power block. Power block.
Rodcastle, Frogs Hollow, housing co-op outside Maloney.
Sandra Cock, Mora Mora.
Laurie, Mura Mura, broken in.
Donna.
Rachel, Murundaka.
Robwyn, interested.
Mark, I'm a Mura Mura member, but I live on the New South Wales Central Coast, but not at Narara.
And Mura Mura.
Tammy, Maloney Eco Village.
Glenn, Mura Mura.
Alex, Gulper Creek.
Terry, Gulper Creek.
Teak Rad Housing Project.
Ray, our community doesn't really have a name, but we're in Chadstone.
Cheryl, ditto.
Mark, my van, interested.
And John, Narara.
Oh,
and then we've got...
What is that?
Sade, I have been living at Mora Mora.
Izzy, I grew up at Mora Mora and am now living here as a non-member resident. Elise?
Do you want to say who you are? Sure. And which community?
Hello, I'm a fly-in from down the hill. I'm Elise from Dream Farm in Tasmania.
Thank you, Elise.
Hang on.
Leafy.
Do you want to give us your name and whether you're community interested or where you're from?
Hi, I'm Leafy, that's my name, and I'm from Hoddles Creek and trying to create an intentional community.
Great. All right. Thanks. Now, do you want to introduce yourselves and where you're from so I'm not dominating?
So I'm Shane Sylvanspring. I'm from Baliabuyal community in Mainarm. And I'm also part of a company, Planning Regenerative Communities, that helps people set up communities, really. And heavily involved as a co-founder in the Afterley Eco Village, which has been going for a few years near Kyogle. And I'm just recently engaged in possibly a new eco village emerging in central Queensland, in Yeppoon. So yeah, I'm quite heavily involved in. I get a lot of calls from people wanting to start community, and now, if years into it, I said, do you have the land or the resources and the people? And if the answer is no to those three things, I said, call me back when you do. And I'm a town planner, so I worked actually here in the Yarra Ranges Council for a long time. So I have a unique skill set, I guess, of navigating the government bureaucracy and rules involved in land use and how that relates to community. So it's been a handy skill set in terms of helping communities and what they can do. And yeah, I'm still here and still loving it. So yeah, my community is very small, but Ballyabullial is just a 12-share land sharing community, and we started about 5 years ago. It's a company limited, not a co-op, because we had to buy it very quickly. And we're all quite sort of similar age, and sometimes that has its ups and downs. There's an elder would be great to say, stop acting like children. And the Afterley community that's emerging, we're actually just open to shareholders at the moment, and we're 36 shareholders at the moment, and it's going to be up to 60 shareholders, so it's going to be quite a village, and it's been my sort of work for the last nearly 5 years creating that one. I don't know. I've got 3 little daughters, married 10 years, and yeah, we all live on a happy little family, I guess. Greater family of the community, and of course, like all communities, lots of issues and ups and downs and round and rounds. That's a bit of my background. I'm also a member of the Global Eco Village Network, so I've taught a number of eco village design courses, probably to around 300 people now. And Trudy, who's here, I first met her in Malaysia when we were there doing the eco village stuff, so that was great. So around the world as well. Yeah, some interesting communities. Like probably one of the most interesting was I sort of stayed a few nights in a community in the Pyrenees with Basque punks that had squatted a medieval village, and I left after a few days because they were pretty intimidating. Anyway, lots of stories with communities, yeah.
All right. Hi, I'm Chelsea McNab. I live here at Murramurra. Been here for 23 years and knew about it as a kid because I used to get babysat here. And so I've got 3 children, all born here and grew up here. And I also manage a pretty large community environment park down in Westbourne. I've been there for 14 years and it's grown into, it's modelled on Ceres in Brunswick, and so it's grown into a really activated community space, and it's not dissimilar in terms of creating a community to this, because there's, a lot of not-for-profits within that community. I've set up a lot of not-for-profits there, and outside of that, and environment groups that all interact with each other and become, a living network of something. I'm not really sure what else to say. Yeah, I guess we've navigated building a house here and living through all the challenges and staying. And I think that was probably the biggest growth is staying. And
my name's Phil Bourne. I'm a co-founder of Common Ground Cooperative, which is about 12 kilometres west of Seymour in Victoria. We celebrated 40 years last year of being a co-op. Ours is quite different in that we're an organisation, in a sense more so than just an intentional community. In that there was 3 pillars to what we were doing, and part of our vision, in terms of being part of creating a component of a more just, non-violent, sustainable world. The 3 pillars that we had to support that was to create a space where social change groups and activists could come to actually support those groups in terms of their group process, and 3, to actually live that out ourselves as an intentional community. We were very small, and Peter Koch advised us 45 years ago that we were too small and wouldn't last. He was correct in that we were too small and vulnerable, and that is true, and that has created some challenges over the years. Not quite accurate, because he didn't realise how pig-headed we were, and that we actually forced our way through to survival. As part of what we're calling our succession process, those of us that are co-founders, one of our co-founders died some years ago, and that made us that were still thriving and now in our 70s to realise that for this to continue, we needed to actually have a succession for the next generation or for others to come in and see whether it could survive. To that end, myself and my partner, Kate, decided to move out, because as long as we were there, we were inevitably pivotal. And so we've moved now to the Cape Eco Village down near Cape Patterson, and have been there over the last 3 years. Quite a transition after 40 years, but we're still active members and actively involved. Sometimes the young'uns listen to us, sometimes they don't. So we thought we'd just clarify who we are and where we're from. So in many ways, having listened to a number of the other things, some of the questions that came up yesterday in discussions were a lot of things about, well, what it's like, or what have you done, or where have you gone to. So we want to, I think, open it up to questions or comments. It can be a forum for putting your own point forward, trying to be aware that, we each don't take up all the space. But if we want to be directed, what now, seeing you've spent a day discussing and thinking, are people wanting to know? And perhaps a bit more about nitty-gritty, because this is meant to be, what's it like in community if you're not there? How did you solve this? And we'll go, I don't know, and pass it on to the next person.
Yeah, and Tanya.
Yes, and it's the magic talking stick.
Talking stick, thank you. Tanya Narara and Global Eco Village Network. We could go backwards a lot, and it's really important, as we did in the Global Eco Village Network project, to look backwards in order to have the wisdom of going forwards. But one of the things that I think we're having challenges with is the future visioning. And the future visioning, not only with those that have had the experience, but those who are here going, man, woman, how could this happen? What could it look like? So the visioning. So I'm wondering, what kind of processes do you have within your 3 or 4 different communities for future visioning?
Who wants to tackle that first?
Well, just funnily enough, at ECOS, which is the community that I manage down in Westburn, we just applied for a grant from Common Ground and was successful for a visioning weekend.
That was lucky.
Yeah, wasn't it? It wasn't any in-house.
No conflict of interest.
No. I don't think it actually was, to be honest. Was it?
Can you tell us a about what you put in the ground. What's it about?
Yeah, so, you know, ECOS is very diverse. So there's ECOS Committee of Management, and then it goes out from there to there's co-locators, there's volunteers, and then there's all of our programs that we run. So it's hard to find time to bring everybody into the one space, because when there's little businesses going on and other, you know, lots of not-for-profits, then there's hundreds of people. And so also inviting in the key players of all of those for one 4-day sit-down session is, I don't think we got the whole 4 days, we're going to do it though, but yeah, it's difficult to make that time. And so we do it annually, and we have an external facilitator come in that has nothing to do with ECOS, and we ensure that. So there's no input really from the facilitator other than facilitating, allowing everybody to dream into, and we also come in with a small amount of money in the coffers to then budget for these projects. So you can actually come out with something tangible, and I think that's really important. It's really boring to vision with no ability to enact any of the dreams that come out of it. I find that really tedious, personally. Yeah, so that's what we do. And so we're going to, but the opportunity to stay at Common Ground and do it within a community, away from our community as well, and take that journey out. I think that's really important, to get a bit of space between, you know, we could have done it for nothing at ECOS, but there's, you know, getting us away. Whenever I'm there, I'm working. I can't actually get in my visioning brain. So yeah, it's a really precious opportunity, thank you. And also to be inspired by the environment that we're in. Yeah.
From our end, we have a strategic. Sorry, you want to? Oh, Common Ground. Yeah.
Can you talk about both?
Yep. From Common Ground's perspective, we have a strategic plan, and in fact, next weekend the membership, of which is about 25 people who are members, not residential, all of them, some of them, but they support the organisation, and we review our strategic plan. Now, in some ways, in terms of the vision, we don't do a revisioning every time we do a strategic plan, which goes over about 3 years, because we've had a lot of challenges, like any community over 40 years, and in some ways you might be doing changes, which we have done significant changes over the years, but you try and reconnect with what the vision is, because in some ways you hope that that vision has got solidness enough that you're actually using that to go, well, what does it mean in terms of our mission and our practical implementation? But every now and again, and a few years ago, we actually, the original members asked the next generation, what do you think of the vision? So there was a point at which we reconnected with that vision and went and had a big session about going, well, are we still relevant? Is what we're doing still relevant? Is that vision still meaningful? Is it meaningful to you as a person 20 years or more younger than we are? And fortunately, and partly because we'd indoctrinated them successfully, but they felt like we were still on track with some specific changes organisationally. Oh no, you don't have that.
So our community, I'll talk about our community, Balea Buyul. We don't have anything as formal as that at all. Future visioning is something probably. So in the Gen, they talk about archetypes, you know, and there's the earth, which is the practical note taker, you know, and there's the fire, the starter. They go out and, you know, straight away start building stuff, and the water, which is about the people, the food, nurturer, and then there's the air people, which are like the vision, networking people, you know, and I'm definitely probably more in that category. in my community, and we don't have many other air people in our community, which is a bit unfortunate. So it's something we're going to have to really nurture, I think, in our community about future vision. But also the two communities I'm involved in are quite young as well. So we're just trying to do the basics of the original vision rather than look at a future vision. But I can see there would be issues in our community going forward for that future vision because, so basically, maybe it's my role to make sure there's a few others that are thinking of this future vision as we go forward. In Afterlead, which is much bigger and it's newer again, we're enacting the vision at the moment, so we haven't talked about future visions, but I feel like that'll emerge definitely because of its size. There will always be people thinking about, what's in the next 5 years. And both of the communities, we have a clause where we review our land sharing agreement policies every 5 years. So that's a good time to sit down and think about where the community might be in the next 5 years. But nothing really super formal like what you guys have. So
I just need to answer the second part because you did ask me about the Cape, and I'll just briefly say, very different community, completely different to Common Ground. It's developer-led. The developer had a vision for an eco-village with an emphasis on really energy-efficient housing. And those of us that live there that are community-minded and are in a sense building up community, and so there isn't really a visioning that's collective, but a growing sense of community. So in time, I'll tell you more about that.
I feel like I should just speak to Murra a little bit, if that's all right, because I just spoke about ECOS. That we have, we have directors' meetings once a month. And on the third weekend of every month, we have a community meeting, and that's where there's it's topical conversations. I don't personally make it to many. I used to make it to a lot of them, but that's where people can thresh out ideas about visioning. And we've also recently introduced at the end of directors' meetings on the first Saturday of the month that there's a little bit of a space for bringing up what topics you might want to discuss at the community meetings. And I think they are they are a way of continual visioning, and we have done a lot of visioning processes over the years, a lot. But I think one of the things that is churning over for a lot of people here is like, are we radical enough anymore? Like when it started, it was alternative energies were really new and alternative building was really new, and you can kind of see solar, even though Glenn, I love what you do, it's cutting edge, but there's solar all everywhere now. What next can we do that's really radical that, do we even want to be radical? I don't know. Yeah.
What does radical mean?
Yeah. And just quickly on vision, like I've just, something happened in our community only a month ago where the vision was really important. So it is really important to have a vision, because we have a vision about, the greater community having events and stuff, and there's a lot of people in our community that don't want outside things, and so we referred to the vision when there was a proposal, of having a rites of passage for young women in our community sort of thing. And because it was in our vision, everyone sort of ended up agreeing, whereas if we didn't have that in our vision, it probably wouldn't have passed. So it's really important to have a good vision.
Yeah.
I think I'm asking this question for people who are interested in
community. Can you speak up? Sorry.
I'm asking this question for people who are interested in community as distinct from, what's your community going to do next, is actually give us a bit of heart and soul of the inside life of your particular communities. What is describe for the people who aren't there, what's it like? How do you live? How do you relate? What's really good, what's not so good, what's the intractable, what have you actually solved? Just a bit of the character of everyday life would be good.
You go first.
Why me?
You got the mic.
All right. It's a challenging one to think of 40 years and how to quickly summarise that. Early days, what it was like, we were younger, enthusiastic, energetic, and actually started with a notion of one table, one purse, one roof. So we were, I think, as Carol pointed out, in the early days, very sort of radical in that sense. That, funnily enough, softened over the years. What was it like? It was exciting, it was challenging. We were described sometime as a group. There was someone I remember, if anyone hasn't been to Common Ground, there's a major building we call the Wedge, which is owner-built, mud brick, mud pour, all recycled materials, and it's got enough room to accommodate 25 people for the conferences and about 12 to 15 people to live in this one building that we built. And someone was sitting there one day going, you crew, you just meet all the time. And we did do a hell of a lot of meetings. And one of our co-founders looked around and went, yeah, that's all we do. That's all we do. We just meet all the time because we'd actually built this building. So those days were heady days, very energised. It was fun. It was challenging. There was lots of debates, discussion, arguments. We had a commitment to sort of conflict resolution, and sometimes, because we were a small group, that founding group was 7 adults and 4 kids. We had more people, but we formed relationships such that we still, even though a number of those people don't live there, when we had our 40th, those people came back to it. They were there. The children that grew up in community. And I say, if you ever want to know whether community has value, don't talk to the adults, talk to the kids. Kids get community. They don't. I've found, and I've looked at a lot of communities, and I looked at ours. I've looked at ones that have imploded and the community's separated, and I've gone, how are the kids? Oh, they're all still. I mean, it's not absolute, and of course sometimes that doesn't work, but kids just, it takes a village to raise kids is just so true. Kids love community. And our children's children now, and some of the people that are even members that didn't grow up there, but their kids come to events at Common Ground, they are community. Even though it's not intentional community and residential, when they get together and they have weekends away, that's the soul bit for me. That's the bit that I go, oh my God, all that blood, sweat and tears, and believe me, there was a lot of blood, sweat and tears, is somehow worth it. Is that what you want?
Yeah, thank you. I can have more blood and guts if you
I can go into that, but we'll start.
Good, because I feel like you just sort of gave me ideas of, when, who was it said yesterday? Someone said that community is at its best when they're building. And I fully agree. We were so lucky to come here when we came here and were able to, we lived in the old house for 8 years while we were building our house. But Glenn and at the time Sarah and Bindi and Simon at the time, we all got to build together, and that was all in Wombat Hollow cluster as well. And it's lucky it worked out that way. And Julia and Jeremy were building down as well, and so we all built straw bale houses, and we all we did help each other out a lot. And the energy of that, and we all had young kids, and the kids would just be hanging around, and they were, I think, really probably the most connective times for me. And then, the children, your house is built, even though it's never be finished, ever. Then I feel like I'm pulled away a lot more now, into like Steiner fees and, the kids go to school. I didn't want to homeschool. A lot of people wanted to homeschool. For me, it was too insular, and I wanted to have a connection to the broader community. And I didn't actually want to homeschool all for 3 children all the way through either. I actually had some drive to create something else in my own life. And so I find it really now, sometimes it just feels like a housing estate and we just live here and come and go and whatever. But then every now and then something will happen that pulls us back into, particularly in the cluster. It really does work, doesn't it, Glenn, as a community. We all know each other so well, and that we're pulled in every now and then to really, do some work or some hard stuff, or and that actually is a good reminder too of why we're here and what we're doing. Where sometimes I think we can get really lost in our individual lives, as Peter's saying, and. I never ever had a desire to live in the same house as a whole bunch of other people. I'm just totally. At one time we were designing our house with Bindi and we were going to share, and I'm really glad that we didn't, because they ended up having their marriage separation, and then it would have been really tricky to navigate with their wanting to sell, and so I'm kind of glad that we did it the way we did it. But I'm feeling like there's a phase now that's pulling me outward more into the world, and the kids too. I really see, I think there's the community would like the teenagers to come and join in and be part of, or the older kids to be really part of something. But they're outward facing in the world right now, and I think that I always try and invite them and pull them, and we've just gone through this sort of policy making about when they start paying dues or when they start coming to work days. But there's no way my kids they'll do it under duress, but they're actually just partying and wanting to, they would love to move out, but there is a housing crisis and it's so expensive. They don't actually want to be here. And I'm sure they love it, in their heart, that it's home. But there's a challenge with that when home starts feeling they get an outward pressure to come and work or to pay dues. They're like, this is my home, and they have no concept of or they haven't opted in, and they've just been born here, and as much as they love it, they don't have the maturity to actually appreciate it yet for what they have. So it's a bit of a funny time where they're kind of like, there's a revolving door in my house at the moment, and they're in and out, in and out, in and out. Me too. And it's just, it's a funny time.
I'll be a bit more nitty gritty in terms of, I'm just thinking the last month in our community. So we're in the building phase.
Yeah.
And all of us are building, basically. So everyone's busy. And we all help each other, which is great. And, cheap materials. Oh, I need your help for an hour with the roof here, da-da-da-da. So there's a lot of collaboration. And one of the sites has a really beautiful view, and there's a bit of a Friday sunset beers on the up there, and there's a lot of collaboration, especially with the builders, which are usually the men folk of the community, which is interesting. Apart from, there's one of the single mums is building as well, so she joins us all. But in terms of nitty gritty, one of the issues we're just dealing with right now is we get a lot of floods because we're on the river, so we get huge floods. And one of our shareholders is pretty keen ecologist, so we're doing a lot of rainforest repair work on the creek and things. And he went and drilled. We have a no poisons policy, but then the camphors are really hard to get rid of. So we have a drill only policy, so no spray. So you can drill the poison in the camphors. And anyway, he went a bit crazy in one tree right near our communal area on the creek with these really bad trees. It's not a camphor, I've forgotten what it's called, but it's from South America, and it's got prickles and it stings and it's crazy. Anyway, he poisoned it, but it was holding the bank up. Oh, no. And so one of the floods, we have many, so I don't know which one it was, washed it away and then undermined our communal area. So then we had this meeting, and then it's like, and then we decided to pay 10,000. Like, one of our shareholders is a really good stonemason and builds beautiful rock walls and earth buildings and things. And he's like, I can build a rock thing, you know, cheaper, to retain stop the undermine. So we were all like, yeah, okay, let's do it. Make the swimming hole even better. We can jump in from the rocks and everything. So we all got excited and paid 10 grand for it. And then he built it and it just finished, and we're all like, yeah, this is amazing. And then the next flood came, and it's now undermined the stone wall. It collapsed. And so, in terms of something simmering in our community, that was only a few weeks ago, and no one's talked about it. And everyone's
mentioned the rock.
I've noticed a few members come and just stare at it and then walk away. And we haven't had a meeting in the last few weeks, and I don't know what's going to happen next. And I think that's why no one's talked about it. It's like, we just spent $10,000, and what do we do now? And no, we can sort this out. And also the collapse of the rock wall has also changed the flow of the river and kind of transformed our swimming hole. So water is really interesting. I feel like our community is like, our relationship with water is, you know, here you have a relationship with fire in Murra. Ours is a relationship with water. And so day to day, you know, that's kind of the stuff that comes up day to day. And we just had, like, just before coming here, you know, we had our first death on the community. One of the father of one of the two sons that have shares, and he got buried on and that was a bit controversial as well, because we did have a site designated for a community graveyard, but the brothers were like, no, he helped buy our shares, so we want him here. And it was kind of hard, you know, because it's like we wanted to honour them. So we ended up, okay, and it's as an exception, because we had to apply for the community graveyard and we hadn't yet, and they wanted to bury him quickly. So we had a funeral there, and we just had it was going to be his 70th birthday, so we had drinks up on his gravesite and planted some flowers, and that was just a few days ago. So yeah, that's like nitty-gritty stuff. Yeah, but it's very new. Everyone's building and in their own worlds, trying to get settled, I guess. So, yeah.
Yep.
And then this kind over here, Walton Creek.
I guess this question's mostly directed at Phil, but open to hearing from others as well. Sorry. But no, you mentioned the commitment to conflict resolution, and like I have visited Common Ground, but I haven't obviously been part of a conflict. So, what's my question? It was sort of like I'm wondering, curious to know, like in the early days or as you refined your processes, like what kind of things did you ask kind of incoming members or get them to commit to in terms of like willingness to show up to conflict resolution, willingness to learn skills, like even just time commitment. Like, for example, conflict can take, like you said, hourless meetings, like hours of it can take a time commitment to going, I'm going to actually do the full, 3 hours of, 3 meetings of 2 hours to actually sit and listen and resolve this and kind of go through that process. And I guess I'm speaking from experience of, I've been living in our community for like a year now and kind of noticing what's worked and what hasn't worked. And one thing we don't have is a conflict resolution process, like a document that everyone's agreed to. And I think it's been a really big problem because when the conflict comes up, and one of us, or okay, to be honest, me, have been like, all right, cool, let's face this, let's talk about this, let's sit down and let's hear each other, let's do this process. And some people are like, nah, I'm out. No, just want to avoid it, don't want to talk about it, I don't have time, which to me I interpret as more like it's not a priority for me, or then there's a whole other things coming up about like what are our conflict, our avoidance, our kind of, or like our, also, I don't know, maybe I'm getting too complicated now, like nervous system responses, even the way some people go fight, flight, and some people go, fight, flight, freeze, just hide in your room, just hide away from any problem. So anyway, trying to get back to a question is, how do you kind of ensure that people coming in and members have what have been your like processes and systems to kind of make that work? Yeah.
First thing probably is, for me, in community, and in fact, in some ways in life, but certainly in community, essential to have a conflict resolution process, documented, clarified, and specified. I think essential. However, even having that, there's no guarantees that it will work brilliantly. So it's sort of like there's no guarantees in life, so to speak. Couples, stay together, in love, something happens, separate. Sometimes it's the right thing to separate. So, so it's like we've been really committed as part of our thing to sort of support good process and conflict and dealing with it as part of it. But I've seen things not work too, even with that good process. However, having that clear from the beginning, so if you don't have one, I'd be working on having one. Get one. You can't force people to engage. We've had situations where people have not wanted to engage, but it's actually what we call an enculturation process coming into the community. And we've been probably rightly, and we're going through a process now of looking at it, if it's actually really difficult to join and become a member of Common Ground, because there's an expectation that you do understand this and that you agree to it. And if you agree to it, then we go back to that. And we try and be as gentle as possible, but still clear. This is the agreement. We're expecting to support you to go through this process. And so there's a sort of cultural framework that comes with that then when people are coming in and they go, oh, well, what's this about? And at some level, I know for Kate and I, who have been there and have been core in this process, we have sometimes become weary with having to sort of go through explaining it again and going, but why? I can just do it. Only going, well, our experience says that, but I think it's vital. So I'd go back to, I don't know, the mechanisms that you have, but go back to flagging that having an articulated process that's staged. You don't have to go to the end point to begin with. There's an expectation that you're actually able to. And the other one is that I think we've got to try and get past is that I reckon every one of us, and I've been practicing this for 40 years, and I reckon I'm still not good at it. So what it is, it's a whole cultural shift that we're actually engaged with here of actually, confronting one of our worst fears, which is actually constructively dealing with disagreement. Culturally, we're terrible at that. That's the way we do it out there. Look at I enter it, the political landscape of our parliament and the elections that are coming up. People don't actually sit down and go, who am I? What am I doing? Am I willing to own my own part in this? No, let's blame the other, let's attack. You know, we're actually involved in a whole process that's really creative. And that's what community is partly about, a willingness to engage in a whole different human process of going, yeah, let's look at how we interact. And the last point I'll make is I've also seen it work really well. I've seen things that have fired two people up or even two groups of people in disagreement about whether it's the wall that collapsed or something that someone did to somebody, go through process and come out and it's actually shed. Again, sometimes look at kids. There's that thing that I know that I've happened, and now that I'm a grandparent, I see it where kids will, you know, get hurt or they'll get angry and they'll just, all this fume and fire comes out. 10 minutes later, they're actually fine. They go, oh yeah? And you go, but what about all that? Oh, it's sort of dealt with. So when it works, it's a beautiful thing.
Can I just say, I really think at ECOS, you know, we use restorative justice processes, and they're really worth looking at if you haven't looked into those sort of processes. Some of the most intense, there was a situation, and it wasn't directly related to us, where someone that was involved with us was the driver of a car with somebody else's child in it, and they had an accident and that child died. That was really bad, and the relationship that was formed through the restorative justice process of the parent of the child that died and the driver was incredible. Like, they came together as family. Like, it could have just been because they were in jail, and they ended up coming together as family, and so the parents of the child that died were incredibly supportive of the woman in jail. So the destruction would have, you know, gone on for their entire lives is there, but it eased the pain so much and the burden. And so we have an external facilitator that we call in, but I also think just in a household situation like up here, sometimes you see the like natural selection. If someone's going to get here and get triggered by something and then not even show up to the process, maybe it's better that they move on, because, you know, like, really, how much energy do we have to invest in someone who's not willing to invest in themselves? I think, you know, sometimes I go, oh, well. Yeah.
It's true what you said about usually the people, you know, we have like a nonviolent communication training or something as a community, and it's usually, not always, but usually true that the people that don't turn up are the ones that probably need it the most.
Yeah.
And in our community, you know, that's happened, of course. And I think in our community it's getting to more like there's an understanding now of self-responsibility in situations of like, I think as you know, living in community, you get to know each other, and as part of getting to know each other, you get to know everyone's trigger points. And so you get to know your own trigger points as well, including myself. You know, here I am, you know, espousing community, going around, and yet in my own community, I'm on the table yelling at people, and, you know, and it's like, wow, okay, I'm triggered here. And so in our community, there's a kind of response. Most people are starting to get a sense of responsibility of like, okay, I'll have a break from meetings for a few months and just work out what's going on for me, rather than, sort of intervention, if you want to call it, or forcing someone into a process. And that sort of is starting to spread, I guess, because people are doing that. Other people are seeing, oh yeah, okay, I see what Shane's done here, taking himself out for a few months, needing a break, because it's like, you know, and then the other person sees, well, actually, yeah, I'm getting triggered here, I need to reflect on that a little bit. And so it's starting to have a bit of a spiral effect in our community of like people being more self-aware of their own stuff rather than forcing them into a process. I mean, that's not, I don't know if it's a good way or not, I mean, but that's what's happening in our community right now.
I think there was a question over here first.
You had your hand up a while ago. I was trying to keep it on.
I did. It's just talking back to the just going back to multi-generationality and purpose, because I, like you, am a second generation community person, and I kind of look at the generations coming up, and I wonder that what you said about whether they will appreciate it, and there's always that kind of time that you're looking outward because you want to go out and find out about the rest of the world. You're not so interested in the community that you've grown up in. But if all of the problems and all of the battles have been fought and all the problems have been solved, like everything from multiple occupancy to conflict resolution and all of this kind of thing, and you're in a situation where the purpose has been somewhat achieved, and I know that kind of all the intentional communities are still kind of battling for recognition in a way, but from coming to this thing, it seems like we're getting towards the point of that being achieved too. And then what is there to attract younger generations, apart from cheaper housing, to the idea that of alternative lifestyle, really? Because I guess that's what it is.
Can I throw that right back at you? Like, can you just, because yesterday you told me how you've grown up on this community and now you're back. And so do you mind just telling a little bit to everyone about what's your experience of that and what you think? And then I wonder if Izzy would like to say something about that too. Would that be right?
Yeah, well, I was pretty much born there, and I had a membership growing up, and for probably most of my young adulthood, which was sort of 18 onwards when you become an A-class member and you pay fees and stuff like that, that we...
Did you want to pay the fees at 18?
To be honest, it's that thing of like taking it for granted that it's just there. It was very much kind of like my parents' thing, and like a sort of a little bit of an inconvenient identity thing because it required a little bit of explanation in the wider world, and then sort of as living in metropolitan areas and trying to have a career and all that kind of stuff, the realities of that kind of set in that the I guess the battle for what it was 50 years ago, and the even the small achievements that were made become valuable, but at the same time we haven't achieved everything that we need to, and so those battles are there for my generation of members, but I think that they will be resolved before the next generation become A-class members. Does that answer the question?
I guess I was just more wondering, like, did you feel because this is my quandary, that the kids feel a little bit burdened by my choice to join, and then they are having to now just not have the luxury of just living at home, like they have to actually, and I sort of want them to see the bigger picture, but did you feel like at 18 you had the maturity to sort of like you're paying money?
It was in my 30s, so there was at least 15, if not 20 years before I came round to see it, and my parents weren't young parents, so I guess it seemed very much of their time, and that their choices were trying to be somewhat counterculture, but at the same time it kind of had a fairly establishment education in the city, and that that kind of meant that they kind of looked at it from both sides, sort of inside and outside, and I think that I can't speak for anyone else, but from my family's experience, it was that it almost feels like there's a necessary gap year, but maybe gap decade. Really sent out in the world like an Amish person.
Thank you. Izzy, yeah.
Actually, really agree.
Izzy's a Murra.
Gap year.
You didn't take the full decade.
I didn't have a gap decade exactly. I grew up here from when I was 7 to 18, and I moved out when I was 18 to travel and live and be in the world. And I'm now 22, so that's about 4 years of being out in the world and deciding to come back here for a while. And part of coming back here was a bit of a pragmatic decision based on cost of living, but the way I've chosen to come back is not to live with my parents, but rather to live here as an independent, with my partner, as a non-member resident with the process of becoming a member. So at Murra, we aren't, children aren't automatically members, and there's sort of a funny little category there that we've been trying to work out. So Chelsea's kids are in a different process to me because I am wanting to be part of the community. I'm sort of in the same category officially as anyone else who came up as a non-member resident, whereas Chelsea's kids have just a bit of a different process to try and encourage involvement and just being a face around, as opposed to kids being hidden, teenagers hiding away in their houses and not knowing who's around. Though to clarify on the Chelsea's kids bit, it's not actually a policy for teenagers, it's for people who grew up here and are no longer children. They're over the age of 21, so it's quite some time still, of grace period of being at home, and then we start to get into that conversation of how much could you be around, contribute, be a known face, come to social gatherings, it's not so much of a financial conversation really, from my understanding. And in terms of why someone would come back and what there is to offer, I think there's a lot in lifestyle and in community. Obviously we're all here for community, but I found when I lived in the city or when I was traveling, you really start to miss those in-between connections that aren't friends and aren't family, but are your mentors and people who are just there, and there's not quite a category for it, but there's support and there's just chats that you might have one chat with this person who lives on the other end of the community a month, and it might be a really pivotal chat that's unexpected to your path. Okay.
Sorry, I'll just make a quick comment on that one. It's an interesting challenge because our daughter, who's nearly 41 and has 3 kids, and her partner live at Common Ground now. But I have fears, and I've talked to her and some of the other kids about the dynasty syndrome. And there was one AGM where, the other members were going, oh, well, we're committed, or, we're people that, and then she came out with this statement of going, it's different for me. I grew up here. I've got this connection, but even though I can state there's not an expectation, she feels a sort of expectation because we've created this huge thing that's magnificent. But interestingly enough, she doesn't want to live there permanently. She wants to get out. She left at 19 and didn't come back until she was 30 or around 30. But now, again, is involved and wants to move out. I don't think there's an easy answer. The last thing I'd say is it's also relevant to what you were saying, that you want to put your mark on something. The creativity of building in community, you see the result of your labour. You go, look at that, and you join with others in that. When you have all that set up, you're still building, but you're building something amorphous, something you can't easily put your hand on, which is the community and the being able to talk to somebody, those things, but they're not as obvious. So that dilutes that experience. And people coming in who are younger, they want their stamp on something, so they want to create something themselves, and that's tricky.
I think 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
All right. Did you get the?
No, I just sort of turned around and they were all up.
I just want to make a very quick comment. There's no doubt that at Narara Eco Village we need a process for conflict resolution, and we're working on it right at this moment. In saying that, I haven't heard it mentioned at the conference here, and I'm not going to sort of go into it at all, but we have a process, a governance process called sociocracy that we absolutely adhere to. It's our bottom line of the way we do things, the structure, the way we run meetings, and the way we decide on proposals and things. And I have no doubt that it stops some conflict. It heads some conflict off at the pass. You know what I mean by that? So I think there is conflict that we would have had that we haven't even had because of the structure of sociocracy. Not saying and taking away from what we need to do and are doing at the moment, but I just haven't heard the word mentioned, and yet it is so pivotal to the success we have now. I have no idea of where we're heading and how we'll be together in the future. It's definitely a social experiment, Narara Eco Village, as all ours are, but please look into that. It's just there for us on a plate. We don't always get it right. We stumble and we make mistakes and all that sort of thing. But the fact that it's there gives us a clear direction of, effectiveness and transparency and whatever the third one is. You know, it means that our needle is always pointed on that. So we can't run away from that. That's all I want to say. Just look into it.
Yeah, well said. I think so. Yeah.
Thank you. Just listening about the next generation and the ones coming, and having a little one, and considering, how the children are running away in some ways. How much involvement do the kids have while building these communities? For all of you who have children who have been pivotal to building those villages and communities, how much involvement your children have had in the community, in growing the food they're eating, or being with each other in a therapeutic way, sharing meals together as a community, these kinds of things, to make sure that they are understand what they're into and what they're here for, and where they're going in the future, so to avoid trauma and having to go away and do whatever that was, because it's such a beautiful thing to be able to live in a community and have sustainable ways of living and such beautiful things at the core of it. But then obviously there's something missing there in regards to what the children are getting and their understanding of why you did it as parents, and why it's important to do it for the world to work in a better way, because the system is broken, and we know all of that. I'm not going to get in there, but that's
kids and community. You want the microphone?
I know. What do you want to say? Go on, have a say.
Do you want to say anything?
Yep. I'm going to say something. And it's just that all the trees that we see is beautiful, and they change colors, and it's like a rainbow.
It's probably the best comment of the entire weekend. Who noticed?
Listen to the present.
I think my kids are really involved, growing up when they younger. The trees are so beautiful here when they're changing in autumn. You know, when we were building, and you know, we had a system when the kids were little where there was a group of us, and it wasn't everyone, just a group of us cooked for each other one night a week. So we'd have 4 nights a week of eating with another family, and that was really great. And you know, sort of phases. I guess it's been phases. And my youngest daughter, Tiger, she's pretty involved, I reckon. Like, she cooks with Susanna. She'll help out. You know, she house sits and bunny sits, and you know, she sort of like gets called on for lots of jobs around the place. And so she has her independent relationships with a whole bunch of people here. And she fronts up. She was helping serve the other night, you would have seen, and she really enjoys that level of involvement and sense of connection with everybody. Her and Peter now can, you know, tease each other a bit, and you know, it's nice. I think that the confidence in connecting with adults is definitely really there, and you know, in the outer world, I can see that benefit of her where she, you know, and recently worked at my friend's bakery for a few days because she wants to be a pastry chef, and she was like, wow, really, I'd have offered her, she's only 14, you know, I'd have offered her an apprenticeship today. And I don't know how much of that is nature and how much of that is nurture, but it's definitely, I can see their level of ability to connect with adults is better for, you know, for the growing up with so much interaction with other adults and the other parenting that happened. And actually, one thing that was really obvious to me when they were younger is that every household has different boundaries, and they have to navigate so many different boundaries. And I think that's so healthy, and they do rise to the occasion. They know that when they go here, they can, you know, get away with that, or where to go to get lollies, or, you know. That's healthy. Yeah, it's really healthy boundaries where they can see more tech, or, you know, like, and they'll seek it out, and, you know. But I think overall, I can see that the way they are in the outer world is much more somehow comfortable to front up. And yeah, I don't know, my kids also had a Steiner education, which is a lot about performing, you know, and I think that learning to perform really helps as well, like that, yeah.
One of the things, a ditto for our kids in having multiple interactions, and we actually had shared parenting because we were a very small community, which had its challenges because, for example, there's a classic story in our history where we would share who gets up with 4 kids from 3 different families, and there was a single person who wasn't actually a parent. And they used to love him giving porridge because he'd do honey and whatever they wanted, and others wouldn't. So there was that thing about who you play. I think one of the big questions that I don't know that we really addressed as well as we might have was about decision making with kids, particularly as they grow up. We're so busy as adults working in our world about trying to make decisions about where we're going and everything. And we would have kids' meetings to sort of try and garner their input, but you know, they had mixed interest in that, and sometimes they would and sometimes they wouldn't, because they're, you know, going, oh, we just want to go out and play. I'm not talking so much about that age, but certainly once you're, you know, 10, 8, 10, 12, they want to have their say. And that's really tricky, but I think it's something definitely worth considering.
Yeah, my kids are quite smaller, so it's in a different situation, and they don't understand. 10, 7, and 2. So that conversation of why we're all doing this hasn't really come up. But the local neighbourhood, they were always like, oh, we always know the kids from the community because we have like a big neighbourhood, greater community thing, and they're like, we always know your guys' kids because they just run in everyone's yards. They ignore everyone's fences and they just go through everyone's properties.
I think I'm not sure the order, but fascinating.
I know you're being persistent.
Yeah.
We're trying to distribute, and you're wanting to say.
Yeah.
Sorry. Mic'd up
Thank
the
you.
audience.
No, I
I
don't
don't
know.
have a question. I actually have a comment on the whole kids in community. As a young person who's just been a teenager not terribly long ago, I didn't grow up in a community, so to speak. I did in my earlier life, like between the ages of like 0 and 8, but then we moved away from that. And I think it's quite an imperative part of becoming an adult is to seek identity and look for that. And a lot of what that manifests as for a lot of people who have capacity is to go away from the way that their parents do and to look at other things and to look into the world and be like, what's happening out there, and, you know, explore. And I think that's not always a negative thing, and people can learn a lot about themselves and who they are and their identity in doing that, and still potentially come back to community if that's the right thing for them, or they might find community in other spaces. So I think that's something to just, I don't know, a perspective.
Yeah, good point, yeah.
Chelsea, you mentioned earlier in our conversation about how the building piece was, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm paraphrasing, was the most fun time in community and perhaps the most interconnected time. Is that right?
Yeah.
Just as I
like
continue.
fun time might be. I think it was.
Could you tell me what precisely you mentioned about the building part, and then I'll go into my question.
Yeah, I think the energy around co-creating something tangible, like you said, and being able to see the change, or, you know, concrete pours are a little bit famous at Murra where everyone comes and, you know, it's like a community event, and you know, I guess it gave purpose or more reason to gather and to have those things, and a daily ongoing, you know, it was a grind and it was hard and it was, you know, babies and children and, you know, and it was so, you know, so we shared childcare a lot in those days, and there was. And I guess it's funny because Glenn, I think you were the one who finished your house first, wherever he is. He's gone out. Yeah, so he finished building out of the three of us at the time before that, and then Bindi sort of got closer, and now it's just dragged on, and everyone just goes off and does it. So it kind of loses momentum, and I think it was hard, but probably the joint purpose.
Yeah. And so my question from that comes from where do you find, like all of you, where do you find that conflict exists more within the community? Like what sorts of things are happening within the community? Because I hear that to be very creative and it's evolving, and people working together a lot more potentially. Do you find that conflict exists in that environment a lot, or is it in an environment potentially where there's not as much evolving in the community, and it's more like we've now created and we are doing life and you know, the status quo, then we're just living the life of what we've then created and not so much of the building element, and potentially them being more conflict in that space, because as a human race, I think we're creative beings, and
I think
when that's not existing quite so much, is there more conflict in that?
I think we've created systems and we've kept on creating systems, trying to tweak and, you know, refine the systems, and so in that we've created a lot of rules, and you know, we're always trying to like change and fix things, like, you know, Sandra's, I don't know how many iterations of the membership process, like, have you seen through that? And you know, so we've created these systems, and I think the conflict exists when sometimes it's just too hard to bother, and you just renegade, go and do whatever you want, because it's too hard to bother trying to work within the systems, because they're so convoluted sometimes. Sometimes it just feels like overkill, you know, to pop up a shed, for example. You feel like you've got your organic natural area around, and you might just pop up a shed, and it just probably wouldn't be an issue if you'd brought it to a directors meeting and whatever, but you just can't be bothered because, you know, you live here, you own the place, you know, you're part of it. And so I think the point of conflict the point of internal brewing, maybe not external conflict, is around contribution and inequities in contribution. And like Carol said, like around stop bean counting. But then there is true, there's some people with certain skill sets that are the best ones to do that job. And, you know, so they have a workload that's, you know, hanging over their head maybe that nobody else actually has the skills to do. You can't just easily train somebody to do. Like Glenn, for example, running off to do the microgrid, like there's no way I would be able to go and fix a problem with that right now. And then people who perhaps don't have a specialised area that they're working in. Like for me, I've been deeply invested in the land management for a long, long time, and it's exasperating that not enough people are getting on to work on the holly. We've got a really holly problem, and you know, and then there's the poisons issue, and nothing kills holly, nothing other than drilling and filling and cutting and pasting. We don't spray either, but it just is and I don't know, I'm just sort of feeling like it's just futile. We'll disappear from this place for 2 minutes and it'll all be all over again anyway. But anyway, that's the two conflicts that I sort of think. One is making it too hard, and even, you know, to join, we want it to be hard to join because we don't want it, but we don't want it to be too hard to join. So how do we do that? And yeah.
A couple of quick comments. One is I think there's a lot of conflict in the building phase, but it's almost, again, concrete, because you're going, do we build this there or not? And that's good practice for the more nebulous conflicts that come later, which will happen. The other one is post the building phase, when you are actually got a common projects, the concrete pours and that, is to actually create things. This event is one. I applaud more and more for putting this on. Bring community together. There'll be people that aren't involved. That's always the case. But those that are, and celebrations. You need to actually celebrate milestones and have actual events that are fun together and actually deliberately sort of almost creating that joy. That helps do what you were saying about almost reducing the potential for conflict. Because you go, you were giving me the shits yesterday, but we had fun last night at the music. You sort of let go of things a bit because of those occasions, so that's really important. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. So there's a question there. There was one over here, someone at the back there, then you, and then we might call it quits, I think. And feel free to talk to me outside the meetings.
Yeah. No, it's fine.
At the back there,
and then Laws.
The fella over here.
Hi, I have a question which it might be a little bit idealistic, I'm not too sure. And as someone that's new to this, it might be inherent in the philosophy of this anyway, but I was just interested to learn more about how you look at diversity and inclusion in your communities and how you welcome diverse communities into your community.
Yeah. No, we're past that now. Didn't you read the memo? DEI's out. Isn't it?
You reckon it's
well, it's a good question and a challenging one.
Yeah, well, you know, not enough, I think. I don't know, because there's so many angles to that, diversity and inclusion. Like in my workplace, we do it really, really well at ECOS. We're really, really good at it at Murumura. It is, again, comes down to, there's no exclusion. It's more about who does feel comfortable. Like, you know, when you walk in, we're mostly all white, cisgendered people, like, unfortunately. Like, how does that make people feel? We would love to, embrace it, but I think it comes into when you come up here again, if you've got the money, because there's people trying to sell houses, like, how are you gonna live here? You can live as a renter. You can do that. If there's a property that's renting that the owner of the house doesn't want to quickly sell, if they're happy to sit on it and have renters in there, we don't have. I'd love to see more ongoing rental opportunities here. That's something that I feel is really needed, so that we can embrace people, if they come, and to have a longer trial period. But in terms of like LBGT, talking about that sort of stuff, and multicultural and cold communities and things like that, I feel like we've got a lot of work to do to sort of nut out how to embrace maybe new migrant communities. And we've talked a lot about this in the past, but I don't think we've landed on something that's really as an invitation, because we might not have the resource. I don't know. Yeah.
I think going like Chelsea said, I don't know any communities that exclude. Like, there's no, and in one way, like, the whole community movement has always been quite open. And I don't know about other people, but in communities, like, relationships can be a bit more fluid often, and so there's always been an openness and embracement of difference from us, like, more than maybe the more outside world. So it hasn't been really an issue in the community movement that I've noticed, because it's communities are about embracing who that person is, regardless of whatever. So I don't know of any communities that there's been an issue around that. It's just more, as Chelsea said, who's interested in community is the main question people have when someone's coming in. And if you're really keen, I've never noticed there's been an issue of that. So yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Look, I think it's a huge challenge. We've had the challenge at Common Ground, very different to the Cape. The Cape creates exclusivity because of the cost, so it actually creates lack of diversity because of cost. Common Ground, it basically didn't cost you anything. You could actually, we've had people live there for 10 years that have had put no money in. So it's a very different thing, but there's still a relative, like you said, if you're a group of people, you're white, Anglo, cisgender, then people come in, and we've had people with diversity, Asian person, gay, but in some ways they don't necessarily feel like it's quite their community. So it's a big challenge, and I think it rests on the skills to sort of work.
There is communities like up in Northern Rivers that especially, so I mean, where you'd feel a lot more comfortable, I guess. But so I guess they create, people who create their own communities to feel more comfortable in that.
No. We'll have one more question and then we might wrap it up.
Yeah. Laurie, yeah. Let's good hang around for what's time.
Thanks. This has been a really good discussion, and obviously we could go on for a lot longer. The question I've got has sort of been partly touched on in terms of Chelsea's comment about participation, and there's been some talk about the conflict that kind of comes out and needs to go through some process, and some things come to a head. But I think there's a lot of stuff that's just interpersonal things that are sort of amplified in a community because of the fact that the same people are interacting at a deep level and regularly, and there's so one of the big things I see is gumption busters. Like, someone's enthusiastic, they've got energy, they've come into a community, they want to get things done. And over time, things happen. We're all, damaged goods in some ways. And it can be through not getting recognition for a lot of effort that's gone in. It can be through burnout, it can be through just bumping up against, or someone sort of overriding someone's kind of sense of ownership of a process or a project. And, I see some of this in this event and in lots of things. Just wondering if there's any kind of more comment on that. And I just want to point out too that this lady's question about how to try and ensure that people coming into a community have the capacity and willingness to try and work through things rather than just retreating when things get tough. I think that's sort of part of the same issues.
Gumption busters.
But dulling the hand of husbandry is how I thought it. But I like gumption busters.
Yeah.
No one understands it when I say that.
I might not have got it either, but I reckon it's, it's a real problem.
Doing stuff. Animal husbandry, husbandry is an old-fashioned word. Doing stuff. Dulling the hand of husbandry. Incredibly common.
Yeah.
So definitely, I'll answer a couple of questions, like in terms of contributions. In my community, we've now got working bees, and there used to be the bean counters, and we've now realised that it's just about turning up. So it doesn't matter if you're there chatting to the person weeding all day, you're still there all day, and so they get ticked off. Because it was about sense of community and all doing it together as well. So that's what we realised was the most important thing. Although usually work gets done, but probably it's just a lot of the conflict's gone without the bean counting of what have you done, how many hours, But the gumption definitely busters are alive in our community, and we haven't, the people that want to do stuff often just go and do it now, sometimes, and which isn't a great thing either. The tree being an example, poison tree being an example, what that's caused this whole flow-on effect. So there's a need for some kind of, process, but not kill the process, because it also, when that was starting to happen, no one wanted to do anything because they're too scared of bringing it to a meeting and being discussed for the next 6 months. So it's something our community still is trying to work out, how to allow things to happen without being torn to pieces in meetings and disintegrated and dismembered, and then the person that wanted to do it is moved on to something else. So yeah, we're trying to speed up things. I think what Lyndall said is really good. Having sociocracy or some kind of governance helps with that gumption busters, if that makes sense. So in Afterleaf, for instance, we've got working groups. So all that's sorted out in a working group rather than the whole community. And so if someone wants to do something, it's a lot faster response and agreement rather than waiting for the next general meeting or something like that. So if you have a good governance system, and it's the same in our community, we have a land care group, and they check in with each other before they do something usually, and so they can go and do something. At least they've checked in with some people. So my answer in terms of the gumption busters, if you have a really good governance structure, efficient governance structure, then it stops a lot of that. It's when you don't have a good governance is when those people or good decision making to allow things to happen is when it sort of gets those people get frustrated.
Or centralised.
Yeah. But it's hard when you've got a small community like ours. How do you do that? And we've basically got only 2 working groups in our community because it's so small, which is the land care and the finance sort of admin team, and that's the two groups. That kind of, you need to have a community function.
I think, can I say, it can go both ways, because we've got so many committees, and I think, people just burn out. We've got membership, reach out, social committee, land management, works committee, ESP, the safety committee. What else have we got? We've got Power Rangers committee. Learning centre, he's telling me, because I haven't shown up for the meetings. This is his way of having a dig right now. He told me he would forgive me for not showing up. But we've got so many committees that that I think, in terms of gumption busting, I can see this looping in two ways. And one is that when you've been here a long time and someone comes in and they're all energetic and they want to try the same thing that you just tried 10 times and didn't work, and they're like, yeah, and everyone goes, it's not going to work. Like, we've done that. And then you squash their enthusiasm, and then off they go feeling deflated and like, oh, I came in and I tried and it wasn't picked up, and and then, yes, you can be empowered on those small committees, but everyone else is like, oh, fuck, not again. I can't do this again. I'm done.
Lack of transparency and communication, wouldn't that just, help move along past that barrier?
The what?
The lack of communication and transparency.
Yeah.
If you have actually used this model for 10 times and it didn't work, wouldn't that be better to tell whoever's coming with the enthusiasm to redirect it in a way to have
well, they might get that, but they might get caught in that whirlpool of everyone giving a little bit of advice, and then it's all just too hard. It's like, because there's so many people and so many, or they might get the bump around, go, oh no, that's a membership committee thing, no, that's a works thing, just talk to them, and then they go nowhere. And then they fall flat.
All right, we need to wrap it up. There's plenty more discussion, which I hope you will continue. And remember, we're in this as all in our own capacities in terms of what we are actually trying to do. We're in the river of social change. We're actually, everything we're doing here is actually creating and working on new systems of human relations and where the world's heading. That's the important thing that somehow ties us together, that in the middle of the conflict, the confusion, the chaos, just keep that in mind. Thank you for coming.
I'm glad you were able to wrap it up.
All right.
Yeah.